back to Rhea Reads. My name is Rhea, and today we're going to get into my DNF pile. So basically a DNF pile, for those of you who aren't familiar with either booktube or bookstagram terms, so a DNF pile or hashtag DNF is did not finish. So these are some books that I did not finish. Some of them I actually like and I do plan to finish, but I just keep getting caught up in the hype of like new releases and fiction, and something will come out and it'll get bumped to the top of my TBR pile. Hashtag TBR is to be read. So you'll hear people say that or see people mention that as well. And so, yeah, I'm not loyal to my list. So I'll have something that's been on my list for a couple of months and it kind of just keeps getting pushed to the bottom because new books keep coming out and I'm honestly here for it. The first book in my DNF pile has to be Silver Sparrow. So Silver Sparrow is by my favorite author, the Tayari Jones. Tayari Jones wrote American Marriage, which is just like, how could you not like a book by her? Like, it's my favorite author. I loved her writing in American Marriage. She has an Audible original called Half Light. I loved that. But Silver Sparrow, I could not get with. So Silver Sparrow is a story about a young girl who ultimately finds out that she has a sister, and her mom kind of resents her dad. She sees her dad like some days of the week, and then you see there's another young girl who's living her life, and they actually live in the same town, and I think they end up meeting at a science fair. And so the mother of the first young girl, she resents the dad, and the book starts with getting into the story of how they met and how he kind of charmed her and kind of played like, you know, he was oblivious to what was going on, but he wasn't crazy. He knew, okay? So he really played on her emotions, and yeah, like they would start a life together, have this daughter, and there were just certain things like they would tell her. She would go to school and she would want to draw her family, like stick figures of her family, like myself, mom, dad, and they would tell her like, you cannot do that. You can't do that. Like, we're not going to talk about family at school. We're not going to talk about family with friends. And she just didn't understand why. And the mother kind of grew to a point where she would just drop little like digs like, oh, your dad, he's not, you know, whatever. Like, and she met who comes to be her sister at a science fair. And I think it was something like they had the same fur coat. And she was just telling her mom, like, this girl has the same coat that I have. Like, what are the odds? Like, dad told me that no one else had this coat. And so it was just that kind of story. But it was like he would spend some days with one family and some days with the other family, and the other family didn't know. And he clearly had more regard for the other family. And so even the book gets into some themes where it was just like, you know, right away when the girl starts figuring out what happens, there's a sense of like worth involved, and she starts looking at the other little girl like, well, what is it about her and what is it about me that sets us apart? Why is it that he, you know, because he claimed the other family. He wasn't claiming her because he was married to the other girl's mother. And so I didn't finish the book because I really enjoyed American Marriage, but this story, like, it was sad. It was sad to me. I didn't even figure out like what happened. I just didn't finish it because it was just pulling at my heart. I didn't like that storyline, so I didn't finish it. So this is one that I actually don't plan on picking up again. Second on my list, I have The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. So you've probably seen this book. You've probably seen other books of hers. She always has like really catchy like illustrations on the cover. It's pretty like consistent. It's her signature. And she's a Black author, Jasmine Guillory, and she writes romance novels, like really fun, like not any Gone with the Wind, you know, type narratives, but really fun romance novels. I hated this book. I'm sorry. And you know, I want to give people grace, and I'm not saying she's a bad writer, but the writing just seemed a bit juvenile to me. It was really like reminding me of like 5th grade sentences. Like I couldn't really stick with this. I expected so much more because I see this book everywhere. Like literally for a while I would see this book everywhere. So in my head I checked it off, like I just know it's a good book. But that's what it is. Like you'd be surprised if you really pay attention to Bookstagram and BookTube, when things get, you know, when they reach a tipping point and there's a hype, the hype is real because people go out and buy it just because they trust the consensus. And that's what happened to me. So this book is about, I think she was chief of staff for like the mayor. So yeah, she wasn't an attorney, but she was like chief of staff for the mayor. And she happens to meet this guy in an elevator, and they end up being wedding date. It's typical thing, like they were like dating, I think long distance at one point, and you know, he swept her off of her feet. I think there was some indecision from him in the beginning, like he was kind of like, I really like you, but I don't want to do too much. Same thing after they met up the first time, like she went back to work. She was thinking about him. She couldn't think about anything else. I don't even know. Yeah, Alexa was the main character and Drew was the guy of interest. This book didn't do it for me. There was no storyline that really grabbed me, so I did not finish it and I do not plan to. All About Love by Bell Hooks, and this is a heavy hitter. So this book, I did not finish it, but I do actually plan on finishing it. I do plan on picking it up again. So everyone knows Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks is a feminist. She's a very well-known person for her discourse and her writing and just some of her like speeches. And so when I got this book, it's because I think it was Smart Brown Girls, curated by Julesy. They centered a discussion around it in the summer. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to get it in time for the discussion, but I wanted to read it during the summer. So I don't know, I just had this different perception in my head all about love. And it's really funny because if you read this book, I actually recommend this book. If you read this book, it will begin to reconstruct what you think about when you hear love. When I hear love, yes, I know love comes in different facets. You have love between parents, love between friends, self-love, but I don't know why I was thinking about like love between like a spouse. I don't know. That's the first thing that came to mind. And this book really talked about love in every single aspect. So, and it kind of centers around, you know, so many things are loosely called love and they're truly not love. And like, I even remember one part of the book speaks about honesty, and she really tries to convey where there's a lack of honesty, there's a lack of love. And so she makes an analogy between the conditioning of men. When men are young, when they're boys, they're told, you know, you can't cry because you're going to be seen as like someone who's really weak. But then we turn around years later and antagonize men and say, oh, you're not showing emotion. And then it's like, well, when he was younger and he tried to show emotion, he was shunned for it. So now he really doesn't know how to show emotion because this is how he was conditioned to be. And that chapter alone about honesty really got me. I'm like, oh, you know, and she talks about love in every like aspect you could imagine. Love for the earth, for the universe that we live in, love in terms of what we believe in, who we believe in. And so I didn't finish it just because I want to give it like more attention and more time, but I will come back to it. So this is DNF that I will pick up again. The Sun is also a Star. This book was actually adapted to film not too long ago, and I think Yara Shahidi played the main character. So I know, from what I know, this book surrounds a young girl. She is of Jamaican descent and she lives in New York City. And really the the storyline is one day. So one day in New York City where her family is facing deportation. They're trying to avoid it. They're trying to do all they can to fight it. And she meets this guy and, you know, they fall for each other. What I did like from what I did read was the bit of like manuscript in here. There are some, I don't remember if it was like text messages or whatever, but you guys know I like that kind of thing. Like I like emails, I like text messages, I like those things when they pop up in books. It gives it some texture. But I didn't finish this, and I got an autographed copy because because the hype, because I just knew that I was gonna like the book, and I didn't like the book, so stop doing that. Next is More Than Enough by Elaine Welteroth. I actually really love this book. So I did not finish it, but I did not finish it yet. I've read most of it, but I still have to finish like the very end. And again, so this is a book, like this is kind of like Becoming for me by Michelle Obama. I read it over the course of a year because I primarily read fiction and this is not fiction. And so I like to read, if I'm going to read this, I pair it with, I'm also reading like 2 other fiction books at the same time because this is something that's, you know, it's a real person, it's her real life, but I like to have like an alternate reality where I can like paint the picture in my head as well. So I kind of got swept away with the fiction. That's what happened with this one, and I just never came back to it. But this book is about Elaine. So Elaine is known as the youngest editor-in-chief of, I think it's Teen Vogue. And she has a really unique story. I love her story. It's a story of perseverance, determination, and just overall just going out on a limb and taking a risk. So she speaks about how she lands her position at Teen Vogue and how she lands like internships before that in college. And she's from California, but she went out on a limb after college, after almost being distracted by somebody. It's in the book. And she just kind of makes her own lane. She actually stayed at her internship even after the term of the contract. Like she just never stopped showing up for work. And so they're like, okay. And you know, she took a couple of risks. She spoke up to some creatives, to some people on set, and she was like vital in a couple of shoots. So I think it's a great story for people who are looking to propel themselves in their career, no matter what field you're going into. So it's something that I did not finish, but I read most of it and I will eventually pick it up again. She has some quotes in here, like before every chapter, and it's a little foreshadowing. And there's one quote in here that's something to the effect of, you know, I learned to accept all the parts of me, especially the parts that were forged by fire. Don't ask me why I remember that, but that's what it said. And I really love that quote. So this, I did not finish it, but I will be picking it up again. Lastly, we have a memoir, Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So Know My Name, this is a true story. I remember when this happened in California, but I wasn't briefed on it too much, but I did get the book. And when I got the book, I didn't realize that it was actually about her, if that makes sense. Like I knew of the story, but I didn't know that it was about her. So this story is about a young woman who she actually went to a college party in California and she was like assaulted. And it goes into her legal case and then just her life, survival, her mental and emotional state, and just like the acknowledgement and the acceptance of like, wow, this actually really happened to me. Like I know that these things happen, but I never knew that they would happen to me. And then just, you know, the legalities around her case and having to assimilate back into the regular world while the case was still actively being pursued by her counsel. And even, you know, having the person who did such horrible things to her also try to build a case of his own. And, you know, it was really rough for her. And so I liked the book because you really got to see like her humanity. She was much more than just a victim. And so I think that was very, like, her story is very courageous. And they do get into some actual specifics in the case, all of that. I really like how it's written. Like, again, it's a memoir, but it's about something that you could easily just look up on Google to see. But it's really interesting to hear her story as a human being versus the headlines and the various viewpoints from which the story was told by like news reporters and such. So I think it was really interesting to read this, and I really liked it. I recommended it to other people. I know 2 people that I know are reading it right now, and I mean, they said it was a little slow. The only thing, so I started reading this, and again, it was heavy. So I would definitely say trigger warning, just because it's a sensitive nature, what she went through and what she had to deal with. But it was heavy. I felt her pain. You know, I was like, little tear. But overall, it was a great book. So I would highly recommend this. I did not finish it, but I plan to. And that's all. Thank you for listening to my DNF pile. Make sure you subscribe, you like the video, you comment. Let me know if you read any of the books, if you felt the same way. If you felt differently, also follow me at Rhea Reads on Instagram. And I'll see you next time.